Welcome to our session today on search-friendly e-commerce with Magento. I'm Tim Kauffold, Director of Operations here at Oneupweb Digital, and with me is Dave Castle. And Dave is our Director of Client Strategy. Now, Dave and I both have a ton of experience, not only in marketing websites, but on the code side of things as well. So I can tell you that e-commerce and doing it correctly is a subject near and dear to both of us.
Indeed, I will agree with you on that, Tim. So today, although we do have experience in the background going on the programming side, today with the audience that we're looking at, we're not going to be giving you programming solutions. We're going to try and keep this more higher level, let everybody get involved, give some solutions that everybody can use. So some of this stuff you may be familiar with, others might be entirely new to you. So let's get going, Tim.
So I think, Dave, it's worth a little bit of a backstory on e-commerce as we kind of set the stage for today's discussion. You know, we'll be the first to admit that there's been huge strides in e-commerce technology over the last few years. You know, I remember not too long ago, once an e-commerce site was up online, unless you had given it a ton of love, and both from technical perspective and just man hours, that site was essentially invisible to the search engines. Today, obviously, we all know at this conference today that would be a death sentence for any site. To not be in the search engines. But additionally, and probably more importantly for the conversation today, is that just having a commerce site really isn't the end. You know, a site in and of itself is not marketing.
Yeah, and to be completely honest, it was. I know we had clients a few years ago where they put the site up, let it go, and it didn't go too well for them. I remember one client that actually had a URL structure that if you copied the URL out of the bar, put it in a text editor, it was 4 lines. So they have come a long way, to say the least. In that case, obviously the search engines didn't get any of their pages. And that's why it was almost impossible for spiders to crawl the architecture of the site. Things like parameters in the URLs, a query string in the URL, all those used to have a big impact. They still do to some degree. Engines, after you get to 4 or 5 different parameters in the URL, we'll start to have some issues. Google's a little bit better than Bing with this, but once you get to that point, they're going to have some issues. But up until there, they've made huge strides. So now if you have those parameters, it's not as big as a deal. So in the early days, talking about being completely rigid, system would be you'd put it in, that's what you get. No question about it, nothing changes, you're done.
Now when we talk about that, are you talking about the way it looked or the way we were able to put data in? I mean, what kind of made those platforms so inflexible?
I can just say yes as a blanket on that. Because it was. You'd put something in, that's what it looked like, you were done. You had your template design, you had URL structure design, everything was in there, everything was done. It was almost like a copy and paste where you're taking an image, just putting it in there, and you're done. Nothing else you could do about it.
So then, given that kind of structure, even if we were able to identify problems with indexing and the way search engines recognized them, it was pretty hard to make any significant change.
It was pretty much okay, you've got this problem, and their answer was, all right, what's our workaround? Because we can't change this.
Right. So, you can tell Dave and I are getting here that any modification at all was an enormous undertaking, even design stuff. And I'm not talking about a reskin here, but just, did we change the particular catchphrase for the company? Was it a new color in the logo? Good luck rolling in a smaller company or subsidiary that you had bought up. But the good news for all of us is that we're well past those days on e-commerce platforms right now.
Well, yeah, and like you said, it could be something as simple as we need to add this to our navigation structure. That was a 3-month process.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, like you said, we're past that, and I'm sure everybody's happy about that because that would be terrible.
Well, I know we're delighted.
Yes.
So today, what we want to talk about are some of the most common challenges we still see and what you need to be aware of when you're looking for an e-commerce platform or solution for your site. One of the first things that we see time and again are duplicate product pages on a website. So Dave, I'd ask you to talk a little bit about what we mean when we talk about a duplicate product page and why that's a big deal when we look at online marketing.
Well, I'm sure everybody has heard this for years. Duplicate content is a bad thing. So if you have a product available 5, 6 different ways on the site, essentially what you're doing is you're creating that duplicate content. We can use an example here, and you can kind of look. This same page is accessible through multiple paths on the site. What happens at that point is you're making it a lot more difficult for the search engines to understand which page is relevant, what one should we choose. As a result of that, a lot of times they just choose one. Unfortunately, it's not always the one that you want.
Well, I want to back up just a little bit though, and when we talk about, you mentioned that there's different categories and navigation paths that can lead to these. Typically the site managers doing something to create these multiple pages, or is it more a result of technology?
Excuse me. Honestly, it can be both. You can have a situation where you have a product that can be in multiple categories. For example, it could be, on a special. It could be your special for the month. It could be a web special. It could be anything. So you create a page for it. It goes there, but it still lives in the other path as well. So it could be something that you're actually creating. It could also be something from the technology side as well. If you have a system that you can actually put in categories. If you put in multiple categories into that system, the product shows up in those different categories.
And so really, the reason we want to avoid this is just to make it easier for the engines to index the page, define its relevance, and always show essentially the same product.
Right. What you don't want is to have it showing up in multiple places and essentially fracture the popularity of that product throughout the site. You want to make sure you're giving them one clear, defined path to that product.
So another common hurdle we face time and again when we help clients get ready to market their commerce site is the ability to control the title and the meta tags. And I know most of you know what these are, but I think it's worth a quick description. And as small as this feels for a lot of people, it's so key. But you can see on the screen where we've highlighted basically the top bar of the browser. That's controlled by the title tag. It's in a lot of ways just a nice usability thing, but it really has some ramifications on marketing. But this is where we kind of tag the page, say what it is, so that if folks were to minimize the window, they could see quickly down in their status bar what that page is. It's a nice reminder. The meta tags then are a little bit behind the scenes, but they help us build descriptions for the page, kind of define some of the keywords. So aside from just the technical, and today all about marketing our e-commerce platform, Dave, why is it so important that we can control those and make those unique?
Well, excuse me. Title tag has, like you said, ramifications across the board, not only from SEO, but also from user interaction. The title tag is usually the first thing a user sees. It's the first chance they have to interact with you, with your company, with your site. So if your title tag is company name, home, company name, something else, it's really not a good interaction with your user. It's not telling them what the site is about, what they're going to see, anything else.
Now, when you talk about that as a first interaction, are you suggesting that people look at the title tag on a site first, or how is that part of that first experience?
Good point. Thank you, Tim. Looking at a search engine result page, so if I were to type in a query, e-commerce platform, I'm guessing Magento is actually going to come up first, just segueing into that later on.
It's a good toss out there.
Just getting it out there for us to start. If you look at the title tags that show up in the search results, that big blue bar in Google, that's actually the title tag of the site. So what is that? How does a user see that? What are they reading? What type of interaction do they have? So for example, for e-commerce, if you're selling hats, if I'm selling Chicago Cubs throwback hats, someone types that in, I see something that says Chicago Cub hat. Okay, that seems pretty relevant, but the next result down I see says 1914 Chicago Cub throwback hat. Hey, if that's what I'm looking for, I know what I'm going to see, or at least I think I know what I'm going to see on that page. Much higher click-through rate. If a user can see what they're looking at, they know what they're seeing. Excuse me. They know what they're going to find. So you go there, click on it, you go to the site. So from user interaction, it has a huge impact. From SEO as well, for the search engines, they can see this page is about, that title tag is telling them what it's about. So you want to be as specific as possible.
So again, it's really just about tying in that relevance and making sure that we're not just some generic label about my store X product.
Yeah.
Because the engines don't know what that means. And really at the end of the day, it's about driving conversions and customer interactions and sales. So it's important that, Dave, as you suggested, we're able to capture people right at the result page and draw them into buying.
Indeed. And then going a step further, talking about the meta tags. The meta description, although from a search engine perspective, it doesn't help as much in terms of how you position, what it really does is gives you a great interaction with your clients. So, again, talking about throwback hats. If my description were to say something like, click here to see all of our products, doesn't really give you a good example of what it is.
Right.
If it says, site has a great selection of throwback hats from Chicago Cubs, Dodgers, whatever, you get a much better idea of what you're going to see when you go to the site, and hopefully increase click-through rate as a result.
Absolutely.
So, talking about titles and metas, being able to customize those brings up another really good point. The ability to control on-page content. This is huge, not only from a search engine perspective, but also from user perspective. What you want to be able to do is, again, if we're talking about throwback hats or e-commerce platforms, you probably have the same description that the manufacturer gave you. Twill, whatever color, whatever, and that's all that shows up on the page. Not very good from user or from search engines. What they see is really generic content that may show up across hundreds of other sites, hundreds of other resellers. Which one's relevant? You're kind of putting it out there to the search engines to decide for you. That's usually not a good plan. I mean, they're going to pick one, but what? You have 1 in 100 chance that it's yours.
Right, exactly.
So you want to make sure that what you're putting out there is extremely relevant, tells the engines and the users what's on your site, and is unique. Again, content management systems, years ago, you couldn't do that. It was pretty much a plug it in, it pulls over what the description is. Now, most of them have the ability to change that. Excuse me.
We'll take a little break here. All right, so. One of the other things too, Dave, when we talk about just even having the ability to take care of duplicate content and, especially around those product descriptions, is how do we do it? A lot of platforms are database driven, which is great because it makes data management really, really simple, and you certainly can change any data in a database. But what's critical is how simple that is and how clean the admin interface is on the back end. The easier it is to make these updates, the more likely you are to do it, the more likely you are to then make your content unique and set your site apart. Be a little bit aware of how you make those changes and what kind of flexibility you have, because that's going to go a long way to how far you're able to push the site when we're, again, looking at online marketing.
Yeah, that's a great point. When you're looking at your content management system, make sure you can use it. Make sure it's easy, you can do that kind of description change. Some of them still are not. Some of them still, it's quite a challenge to do that. So, this goes right back to talking about duplicate content, which we just started going into. We talked a little bit about which one's going to win, which one's most relevant based on duplicate content. A lot of times, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the manufacturer that wins. It's going to be that main site, the first one they find, the first one that has that content out there. So for you to show up, you need to make that unique. It's not a want, it's not a, we should probably do that at some point, it's a necessity.
Well, and two, in the example that we're showing with, it takes a little bit to get all of these sites to show up on a page, but you can see where everybody is drawing from the same content. You talked about the manufacturer oftentimes winning, but that's certainly no guarantee.
No.
Anymore, the number of factors that go into it include age of the site, popularity of the site, oftentimes what's the checkout system. So, we can't stress enough how important it is that you be able to work with the content of your pages through whatever method that ends up being. It's a matter of being stuck in a sea of same if you can't make those changes.
Yeah, and that's a good point. If you look at a system like eBay or a site like eBay, something like that, a site that's been around forever. If you're a new manufacturer, you bring a new product onto the market, unfortunately, your site's brand new, eBay's been around forever. A lot of times, eBay will outposition you if someone's selling that on there.
Absolutely.
So
we've talked a lot so far about where commerce platforms have come from, some of the challenges they can present to us, but I think most importantly for today is moving forward. We here at Oneupweb have chosen the Magento e-commerce platform as our choice when we're developing for clients. We're going to get into the specifics of why we made that choice here in the next couple of minutes, but I think it's important that we talk about the considerations you need to make to address all of these issues we've laid out so far. So to me, one of the first things we talk about with any of our clients or prospects, and one of the things that's most important, is considering the ERP, or the back-end system.
yes.
What are you tied into from an inventory management, a warehousing, fulfillment standpoint? A lot of times those can present some limiting factors for what we put on the front end to transact at the website. So you want to address that and kind of understand what you're looking at very early on in the process. And we see a huge variation in this. Commerce has been going on so long on the web that we see everything from these massive legacy systems that were never designed to go online, but have been sort of patched together and rebuilt, to clients who have been almost doing it by hand on the back end with spreadsheets and emails, going to a formal platform. And the fact is, in our experience, in the number of years we've been doing this, we've seen some really amazing homebrew solutions that companies have put together. But in every one of these, there is a solution, but these are the things we have to consider, because as soon as you try to just slap a commerce platform on top of that back end without thinking about what it means, your project just doubled in length and probably tripled in complexity.
Yeah, at least. I mean, you also have to think about this. If you have a small business, for example, starting out, what kind of talent do you have in-house? Do you have the people that are going to be managing this day to day? Do you have an IT team? What level of comfort do they have with the system? Because again, like you said, once you start doing this, once you start adding the commerce platform to it, who's going to manage it? Do they know how to use it? How complex is it? So, excuse me, you need to understand who on your team is going to be using this, how they're going to be using it, and what they're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. Anybody can learn one of these systems, but what you don't want is 6 months down the road, someone coming and saying, well, I think we've got this figured out now, but we're going to have to do a little more testing to make sure. From a business standpoint, that's really not a good marketing strategy.
No, slow to market is never the way to be.
Yeah. So when you think about this, choosing your team, who's on the team, what they're going to be doing, what do they need to be doing? Is this site just for transactions? I mean, are you going to have catalog, purchase, or what is it going to be doing? Are you going to be adding content to it? Is it going to be a full site? Magento lets you do that.
So one of the things we love about it is, we're not stuck just as a catalog site. We can go ahead and fill out a lot of marketing content, which is really critical. Additionally, we can do some sort of resource libraries. Again, the flexibility. And without giving away too much right now, we'll get into that shortly. But the last thing too, we've talked about understanding your ERP or your inventory system. We've talked about knowing who on staff is going to be doing the work. Talked about defining for sure what the site needs to do for you. And finally, I would challenge you to get with your system administrators and your IT guys and understand hosting environments. This often gets very technical, but depending on where you host, what your servers are set up to do, you could again eliminate or sort of push yourself towards the right choice for a commerce platform. Those that are dependent on Microsoft IIS, that sort of narrows the field for you. Or depending on what your database requirements are, again, that further narrows the field. So again, it's all about understanding what kind of flexibility you have before you get off and go running with it.
Yeah, don't choose a platform before you know what your capabilities are.
Exactly. So for us here at Oneupweb Digital, we've evolved through the years and had a chance to work with literally dozens of commerce platforms. And all these things we've presented so far has colored our search when we set out to find a platform of choice that we wanted to work with for our clients. One of the real strengths for us and one of our kind of core values has always been that typically we're very platform or system agnostic.
Yep.
If a client's got a system in place, we can work with it. Now the reality is, when we set about to pick a commerce platform, we had to make a choice. So the reason we went with Magento primarily is because it allowed us to stay very, very sort of independent of all these other factors. So, if we take a look at everything it can do, backends become a much less limiting factor with Magento. It's so extensible that we can write a lot of pieces that'll bridge to any ERP or inventory. Additionally, it's hugely flexible just from an appearance standpoint. We really aren't bound to anything. I can turn the creative team loose, let them come up with any design they want, and we can marry that.
And then work it in,
So, and the last big piece, on a technical standpoint, is that it is open source, which not only does that drive community development for it, but it allows us to get in there and customize for what exists for a client. We're fortunate we've got a really talented team that can do the custom coding to get Magento to work with anything else on the market.
Yeah, like you said, all these features, the control, the feature set, library plugins, all that makes us a great platform for people to use. Everything from large business to small businesses. I know I have a number of friends that have recently, in the past few years, set up businesses online. All of them use Magento. That wasn't actually based on my suggestion or anything like that. They just found it, they started using it. It was easy for them to get involved. Some of them had almost no experience on the web. So it's a real easy one to get involved with, a real easy one to use. Like you said, because it is open source, there's a ton of data out there. There's a ton of plugins, and everybody has information on how to do it. I mean, you look for help, there are tons of sites, specifically, kind of lost that one there, didn't I? Tons of sites specifically set up to help you with that.
Absolutely.
So in addition, it gives you a lot of control. Titles, metas, content, all those elements you can control in Magento, you can change. So it's not necessarily that difficult to get involved with it. And I would suggest if you haven't looked at it, it's free, it's open source, download it and have a look at it.
Versions are free anyway.
Not going too far into it. In addition, talking about inventory management, real easy to do with this, allows content-only pages, which is really key for what we're talking about today. So although you can have your pages with your products on it, you can actually go in, like you said, create a resource library, anything like that to help define what your product is, define for a user what they can expect to find on the site, which is obviously key for marketing not only to a user, but to a search engine as well.
So the last point we'll make about Magento today, and this may feel a little bit smaller at first, but actually we've seen time and time again, this becomes one of the biggest, most important pieces, is understand what technology your team is comfortable with. One of the things that really drove us to Magento, and we've talked about so many good things. I mean, it addresses all these marketing concerns we've brought up. It's flexible on the back end. We know we can tie in with existing systems for customers. But additionally, our team is very fluent in and comfortable with PHP, which is the underlying language of Magento. This is a really big deal because if you can avoid it, you don't ever want to learn a new language to deploy the front end of your commerce site. So, if you're primarily a .NET shop, that's something to keep in mind. PHP for us is the better way to go, but again, we know there's a lot of things to consider for any company when they're looking to make a move like this.
Not saying you shouldn't learn new languages, just to implement
Not for launch.
Not for launch, don't do that.
So listen, we want to thank you for sharing some of your day with us. Clearly we're fans of the Magento Commerce platform, so much so in fact that we work with Magento officially in their partner program. But no matter the platform that you choose to work with and what's right for you, we can't stress enough that you consider all the factors that come into play, not only for selling your product online, but for allowing you to market that site online as well.
All right.